We are in Nehemiah chapter 6 this morning. I'm very excited about this message. Hopefully God will let us get through it. I'm very excited about what God has opened up in this. I love the story of Nehemiah, and we've been in this for several weeks now. Nehemiah is a man on a mission, and we're reading this story because I hope that you and I are a church of mission. We have something that God has called us to do, and we want to see Him use us in the community around us. We want to see His plan enacted through us, just like Nehemiah did. Nehemiah gets word about the city of Jerusalem, that because there are no walls around the city, it is constantly being pillaged, and most specifically, God's temple in Jerusalem is being pillaged and taken down. And he tells us this, he says, God put it in my heart, this plan to go about and go fix the walls. So Nehemiah goes to Jerusalem, he's a cupbearer to the king, he gets all the authority he needs, and the whole book of Nehemiah up to this point has been about him trying to get the walls of Jerusalem built to protect this city from invaders. But immediately when he gets there, he starts to meet opposition. Anytime we do something for God, we will meet opposition, won't we? It's not a question, it's going to happen. He meets two guys named Tobiah and Sanballat, and they are just not happy with what he's doing. And it gets to the point, last week, we looked at this message behind the mask. It gets to the point where they put together a military attack on Nehemiah. They say, we're just going to go kill him and all of his workers, and that will stop the work on the walls. That will stop God's plan. Now, what we looked at last week is we do want to look behind the mask. What made these people so angry that they were willing to kill Nehemiah and his workers? And after we kind of peeled back the layers on that, we've decided that there are spiritual forces working in the world all around us at any given time. And anything that God is trying to do, Satan has a plan to oppose it. And that's what Nehemiah is going up against. It may seem like that he's going up against a couple of bad guys that don't like him. No, Nehemiah is going up against spiritual attacks. Well, the story through chapter 5 was that Nehemiah was getting ready to fight. He had everybody ready. He put out an armed guard. And when the forces that were coming against him seen that he was ready to defend himself and defend the walls, they turned away and ran. And that tells us something very important about the spiritual forces and the spiritual attacks, is that Satan is a coward. When Nehemiah was ready, he wasn't about to attack. Satan only attacks when you're at your lowest. The spiritual forces only come after you at your lowest. Now, Satan doesn't give up that easy. It might have been easy to finish the book right there, or finish the story, and Nehemiah finished the wall, the end, and then it's the next book of the Bible. But there's more of the story that goes on to this because Satan is very persistent. Every year when I teach my kindergartners, when I teach my 7th and 8th graders, the first thing we do in the first week of school is I pull up an old cartoon clip of Wile E. Coyote. You guys remember Wile E. Coyote, right? Some of you do. And you guys are like, Brian, this is 2 cartoon references in 2 weeks. It's too much. I have a plethora of knowledge on cartoons, so they're going to come out. Wile E. Coyote, I love Wile E. Coyote. He is so persistent, and I teach my kids persistence through Wile E. Coyote. When something doesn't work for Wile E. Coyote, he comes up with the next one. At first, he's going to try to catch this roadrunner, and he builds this giant catapult, and he puts himself in it, and he tries to catapult himself at the roadrunner, and it doesn't work out for himself. But Wile E. Coyote, he doesn't quit. He comes up with another plan. And so what he'll do then is he'll go get a giant rocket and strap it to his back with roller skates. And when that doesn't work, he'll come up with something else. Now, I teach that to my kids, that persistence is a good thing. But I'm telling you this morning that Satan has that same level of persistence that Wile E. Coyote does. If one thing doesn't work in his attack on God's plan, he's going to come up with another plan, and another plan, and another plan. And as we look in Nehemiah chapter 6 this morning, I want us to look at 3 traps, the next 3 things that Satan tries to do. And it's 3 traps that I hope that we can learn to avoid. If you would read with me, chapter 6, we're going to read verses 1 through 4. Keep your Bibles open. We're going to come back to it. So here's the story of Nehemiah. It says, Now it came to pass when Sanballat and Tobiah and Geshem the Arabian had the rest of our enemies heard that I had builded the wall, and that there was no breach left therein, though at that time I had not set the doors upon the gates, that Sanballat and Geshem sent unto me, saying, Let us meet together in some one of the villages in the plain of Ono. But they thought to do me mischief. And I sent messengers unto them, saying, I am doing a great work, so that I cannot come down. Why should the work cease whilst I leave it and come down to you? Do you hear the sarcasm in that? He's like, I'm too busy for you guys to come meet y'all right now. Verse 4, Yet they sent unto me 4 times after this sort, and I answered them after the same manner. All right, so let's look at the trap that we start off with here. Trap number 1 that I want to talk about today is the trap of lies. The trap of lies. Nehemiah is building this wall, and he tells us that he's making a lot of progress. All the way around the city of Jerusalem, they have got the walls finished. He says the only thing left undone is the gates being put up. Now that may seem like a small task, but when we're talking about the gates on these kind of walls, we're talking about something 20 to 30 foot tall, several inches, if not feet thick, very, very heavy. They have to be lifted up with none of the machinery we have and put on there. So he's not quite done, but he's getting close. Now Sanballat and Tobiah, who have been trying, because they have this behind the mask, these spiritual forces pushing them, trying to disrupt Nehemiah's work, they realize, they get in a little bit of a panic and they say, if we're going to stop him, it's got to be now. Another couple of weeks and it's going to be too late. They'll be able to defend themselves. And so they come to Sanballat and they offer him friendship. You got to think about this. Nehemiah has just survived a military attack, or almost a military attack, where all of these people were going to come down with swords and spears and try to kill Nehemiah. And now the people who are wanting to attack him come down and they send him a letter. He said, why don't you come out of the city and why don't you come meet us out here so that we can talk? And to Nehemiah, you have to think that was an attractive proposition. These people who were trying to kill me, they want to come together and have a peace treaty. They want to come together and end this thing. And so it did seem to be friendship. They offered him something nice, but it tells us later on, it says that they planned mischief. And what that means is their idea was to take Nehemiah out of the city, away from all the people with weapons, have him come there to meet him like under a white flag type situation, and kill him where he couldn't do anything else. Boy, they're sneaky, aren't they? They can't attack him directly, so they try to lie to him. Now, I want to focus on how they attacked him. They offered him something nice for the purpose of luring him to death. This is the trap of lies. I'm going to tell you that I've got something good for you in order to use it to destroy you. And that was the ideal. And you and me as Christians, as we engage in building something in this city, as we try to do things for God, we've got to be willing to look for the trap of lies. See, Satan loves a trap of lies. It's his favorite thing to use. As a matter of fact, every attack that he comes up with has some degree of lie to it. In John chapter 8, Jesus Christ, who not only knows Satan, but made him, who was there when he got kicked out of heaven, Jesus Christ calls him the father of lies. That's how he describes Satan, that he is the father of lies. So this is Satan's favorite attack to use on people. It's just simply in his nature. I'm going to offer you something attractive, and it's going to lure you to your destruction. And for you and I, all of those things that he offers us, we just simply call them sin. And let's be honest, if you ever hear a pastor say, sin is not fun, sin is bad, but it appears awful fun. I'm not going to lie to y'all. There's always a draw and something attractive about sin that says this is going to make your life better in some way. That this is going to be fun, that you're going to enjoy this. But the purpose of Satan drawing us into sin is to destroy us every single time. So we need to be looking out for Wile E. Coyote, i.e. Satan. We've got to be looking out for his attack of lies, because he will lie to us about the consequences of the actions he's calling us into. Look at what he did in the Garden of Eden. He came to Eve and he lies to her. He comes up to her and he says, God said you could eat all the fruit in the garden, right? And Eve says, yeah, everything except for that tree in the middle, the tree of the knowledge of life and death. And Satan goes, he told you couldn't eat that? She said, yeah, I'll do something like I'll die if I do that. I don't even know what die means, but I'll die if I eat that. And what did Satan say to her? You won't die. And then he offers her something attractive. He said, you will become like gods. And God doesn't want you to have that because it's going to make you too special. He lied to her for the purpose of drawing her to destruction. And between Adam and Eve and the sin that they committed, we now all deal with sin nature, and we still deal with the exact same trap of lies that Satan comes to us and he says that this is good, but the whole purpose anytime Satan draws us to anything is to draw us to death. I've told the mouse story, so I'm not going to tell the whole story, but when I got married, we had a mouse in the house. And my new bride, who I wanted to impress so much, was not at all impressed with this living situation. So she got after me, and anyway, the whole point is that I had to come up with a way to catch that mouse. Now, what I did is I didn't stand out there with a butterfly net in the middle of the night hoping that thing would scurry across the living room. I set a trap, and I had to bait it with something the mouse would find attractive. Crackers or cheese or peanut butter. And the whole point of it is it looks good to you at this moment, but the second you take part of it, it's going to kill you. Or it was supposed to. It didn't really work very well for me. But that was the whole point. Satan loves mousetraps. He loves the the trap of lies, trying to pull us into sin by lying to us and telling us that it's good for us or that it's enjoyable or that it will make our life better. Here's what you need to know about Satan. If you don't know anything else about him, if you don't know where he came from, if you don't know who he is, he hates you. He hates me. He hates the human race. And it just astounds me that people think that he's a fun guy to play with. See, Satan has two problems with us. Number one, Satan hates God. And you and I, according to Genesis, were made in God's holy image. When Satan sees you, he sees the God that he hates. And he wants nothing more than to destroy you for that purpose. You guys ever see a child and they're running around and you just go, you remind me so much of your mother, or you remind me so much of your father, or you look just like your grandparents. And that's what Satan sees when he sees me and you. He goes, you remind me so much of God. And he hates God because he cannot be God. And so for that reason, he wants to destroy us. Secondly, he hates us because God loves us. If you hate somebody, you will hate anything that they love. And Satan looks on this entire earth, and Satan doesn't care about God doesn't care about the Rocky Mountains. God doesn't care about the seas. God doesn't care about all the things we find beautiful about creation. God cares about us more than anything in the world. And Satan can't stand that. And he knows that to break God's heart, all he has to do is find a way to destroy us. And so he'll come after us with this trap of lies, pulling us into sin, trying to pull us away from all of the things that God has created us to be for the purpose of luring us into destruction. We live in a world, if you watch TV, if you listen to the radio, if you go outside, we live in a world that celebrates sin. And we are flooded with the message that this is love. Love yourself. This makes your life better for every sin there is out there. And it's Satan's trap of lies telling you if you'll do this, your life will be better. But secretly, he has that trap set for you. Now, we tend to think of sins, when we talk about sins, we tend to think of all the sins everybody else does. All those people out there living that way on Sunday morning or Saturday night. We have this ideal of what the bad sins are and what the okay sins are. Like, I'm not going to murder anybody, but I might do something else. I'm not going to steal from somebody, but I might lie. Listen to me carefully when we talk about sin. Is Satan will destroy you with pride and anger as quickly as he will with adultery or addiction. And so for us as a church and us as individuals and us as Christians, and there's some things that we hold tight to is like, I will not do that. Understand that Satan is still coming after you with other sins that maybe are not as public, but they have the exact same result. It's destruction, and it's a trap. So I've spent a lot of time telling you about the trap. I guess the question is, if we know what the trap is, how are we going to avoid the trap of lies? How do we keep from being like Adam and Eve who fall for the lie that this will make your life better, that this will make you like God, that this will make you happy, and falling into that trap of destruction? Well, look at what Nehemiah did. Nehemiah replies to these guys when they try to trap him by offering him something attractive and coming back at him or with a plan to kill him. He replies to them he says, I've got something really important to do. He said, I'm working on these walls. Why should the work stop while I come meet you? I love Nehemiah's laser-like focus. Like, here's these people that are basically saying, hey, if you'll come meet us, maybe we won't kill you. And Nehemiah says, I don't have time for that. I'm doing God's work. And so for us, you and I, what we have to do in order to avoid this trap is we have to be so focused on what God has called us to do that it's not even attractive. See, the reason sin comes into our life is because we desire whatever that sin is more than we desire God. If we can get to a point where we desire God with a passion, these other things will not tempt us. Because in the light of spending time with God, in the light of doing God's work, in the light of being at church, in the light of reading my Bible, in the light of being who He's called me how to be, those things just seem nasty and dirty to me. See, Nehemiah was so focused on his work that he had to do, he realized he had the discernment. He even tells you, they were going to kill me. But it's only because he was so focused on what God had him doing and not on the circumstances that were surrounding him. You and I need to have that same heart and that same mindset. We've got to find God more desirable than sin. We've got to love Him with all of our hearts, which is the first commandment that He gave us. Let's keep reading and see what other traps Satan tried. Verses 5 through 9 here. He says, Then sent Sanballat his servant unto me in a like manner the fifth time. So here we go, 5 times. Hey, come meet with us. This is the 5th time. It's going to be a little bit different. And an open letter in his hand, wherein was written, It is reported among the heathen, and Geshmu saith it, that thou and the Jews think to rebel, for which cause thou buildest the wall, and that thou mayest be their king, according to these words. And thou hast also appointed prophets to preach of thee at Jerusalem, saying, There is a king in Judah, and now shall it be reported to the king, according to these words. Come now, therefore, and let us take counsel together. Then I sent him, saying, There is no such things done as thou sayest, but thou feignest them out of thine own heart. And they had, for they had made us afraid, saying, Their hand shall be weakened from the work, that it be not done. Now therefore, O God, strengthen my hands. You remember Wile E. Coyote? The first trap doesn't work. The giant catapult doesn't get him to catch the Roadrunner, and he switches to the rocket-propelled rollerblades. Satan's switching to his rocket-propelled rollerblades. Listen to what happens. This is going to be trap number 2, the trap of fear. The trap of fear that he works. They're trying to get him to come meet them out of the city where they can kill him. And Nehemiah is too smart for him. He cannot be caught. He cannot be stopped. And so they decide, we've got to try something else. And the 5th time they invite him out, they send the messenger with an open letter. And you and I in our society, we're familiar with open letters. It's when I want to say something to somebody, but I want everybody else to know that I'm saying it to or about them. We see it a lot on social media or in newspapers that somebody will write an open letter to the president or an open letter to congressman or congresswoman such and such. And what they say is, this is what I disagree with you about. And the whole point is that everybody can read it and agree with me. And this letter they sent to Nehemiah said, look, everybody knows. Isn't that the worst thing that Christians can say? Everybody knows that you want to be king of Jerusalem. Everybody knows that you've even got a prophet telling people that you are the king, and the whole reason you're building these walls is so that you can keep a force out, an attack out, and you can be king and be protected. Now you've got to understand for Nehemiah, this is a death sentence. This is not just something that somebody is running my name in the ground. They're talking bad about me behind my back. If you are in this kingdom in this time period and you rebel against the king, it's as quick as a snap for your execution. And so this open letter for everybody to read says that Nehemiah is trying to go against the king, and therefore he'll probably end up being killed. And it's not just that they said it to Nehemiah, they said everybody knows it, and then they put out a rumor. Now we could preach a whole sermon on rumors and gossip. That's not it this morning. But understand that rumor here was a tool of Satan, that it was a tool of fear specifically for Nehemiah. Now the whole point of this is not to have Nehemiah executed, although that would have been great for them. They were looking for how Nehemiah would react to the fear. How does fear cause you to react? Before my wife was very pregnant, my favorite thing to do is when I heard her drive up, hide somewhere in the house and jump out at her. It was the funnest thing ever. And she would scream, and I've been abused. She hit me a few times. I'm just going to tell you all that. Fear causes us to react in weird ways. When I was about 18, my friends came to me, and at the time I went where my friends went. It was getting around Halloween time, and they said, hey, Brian, let's go to a haunted house. I said, I don't want to go to a haunted house. They said, yeah, we're going. Okay, that's about how much I resisted back in the day. And so this haunted house was a place where people put masks, and it was all dark, and you had to go through this maze inside, and people jump out and scare you. Now, what I didn't realize at the time about haunted houses was you do not want to be the person in the front of the group or the person in the back of the group. Those are the two people that get jumped at the most and scared the most. And so my friends, because I was the smallest one of them, literally physically picked me up and put me in the back of the line as we walk into this haunted house. I did pretty good for a little while. But as we were going through this haunted house, I happened to turn around over my shoulder, and there stood some goon in a mask, and he was reaching out to touch me. I lost it. I flipped out, guys. I mean, it was the scariest thing. I might have wet my pants a little bit, although that's not confirmed, but it might have happened. And so I'm trying to get away from this guy because he is scaring me to death. And my friends are all in front of me, and we're in this narrow hallway. So I'm trying to go left, I'm trying to go right, and they're doing like this linebacker, like keeping me from going around. And I finally decided I can't go left, I can't go right, I can't go under. I'm going to go over. I grabbed my buddy's shoulders like this, and I jumped up over him. I actually got across the heads of two of them, ripped one of my buddy's necklace off before they picked me up and put me back in the back of the line. Now, when I come running and screaming out of there like a 4-year-old little girl, I calmed down, I caught my breath, and I looked back at that building. I thought, that was stupid. It's just a guy in a mask. Why was I so scared at that moment? I was able to think rationally when I wasn't in the darkness and something wasn't scaring me. The point of the story, fear makes you respond irrationally. See, Nehemiah Nehemiah was thinking very clearly. It's like, as long as I'm doing God's work, I am protected. And this was the trap of fear. If we can make him scared, he won't think clearly about God anymore, and he'll be a vulnerable target. Satan loves the trap of fear to try to make us a vulnerable target, because it will cause us to do irrational things. It will cause us to act out in anger. It may cause us to run away from the work. It may cause us to stumble into some kind of sin that we think is a comfort. And look at what they were saying. The ideal was, they said, hey, Nehemiah, everybody says this about you. And basically they were implying, you're probably going to be killed for this. And then what did they say? Why don't you come meet us like we said the first 4 times? See, the point of the trap of fear is to send you back into that first trap, into trap 1, the trap of lies, the trap that will destroy you. And they were hoping that by scaring him, he would not be able to think long enough and hard enough to keep from falling into that trap. The other thing is that fear is a distraction. Fear will distract us from everything that God has us to do. Listen clearly. Worry is the enemy of work. Worry is the enemy of work. You cannot do God's will and be worried about what's going to happen at the same time, because we walk by faith. You can't do both at the same time. In our society, drunk driving is something that happens a lot, but it's kind of dying out a little bit. But now the big thing, the big push is distracted driving, because every last one of us have this thing right here. And it's our God. And let's be honest, it almost is. When this thing goes off, we're going to answer. And one of the problems we're having in society right now is teenagers and 30-year-old preachers that they're going down the road and they're driving, and that thing goes off and they think, I have to answer that text message right now. I have to see what's going on social media right now. And so what we'll end up trying to do is we'll try to drive while looking down at our phones. Can you drive like this and look at your phone at the same time? You can't do both. You can't do well. The distraction keeps you from doing your first job very well. Satan wants to distract us from our job. See, he gives us all these things to be scared of. There's a fear of, what will it cost me if I do this for Jesus? What will it cost me if I make the commitment that I'm going to be at church every Sunday? What will it cost me if I make the commitment for the first time to be a follower of Jesus? And you'll even hear people that have contemplated this and they said, I don't want to be a Christian. Y'all don't have any fun. Now you notice here that the trap of fear is still based on a trap of lies. It's still lies that Satan comes to us. But there's this thing of, what will it cost me if I do this? What will it cost me if I do that thing God has called me to? Will I lose my job? Will I lose my life in some places? Satan tries to keep us with fear from doing what God has called us to do. There's also the fear of, what will people think of me? Well, if I say that, everybody's going to think I'm weird. If I do that, people are going to think I'm weird. That person will probably shoot me if I try to tell them about how much Jesus Christ loves them. The fear of the what ifs will keep us from doing God's work. Some time ago, I was out with my wife. We were at Colton's. And there was a guy sitting at the bar, and he just lit up like a beacon to me. I just couldn't help but noticing him. Saturday night, he had drove to a restaurant to sit at a bar by himself, not talking to anybody. And there's this little voice going, you need to go invite him to church. I'm like, that guy doesn't want to be invited to church. And I just kept noticing him. I couldn't even enjoy my meal. And so I thought, I'm going to do it. I'm going to walk up to a complete stranger in the middle of Colton's and invite them to church for no reason. I didn't have a clue how to do it. So I got up and I was walking towards him, and I changed my mind and I went to the bathroom. I faked it out a little bit, but I was coming back. I was like, I've got this. And so I just stopped by. He was watching a football game. I said, good game, and started talking about the game a little bit. And the conversation, I just wanted to turn it to Jesus so much, but I was scared. I can't just be the guy that walks up to him and be like, so how about this Jesus? I was scared of that. I was eventually able to just barely squeak out, hey, it's good to meet you, and handed him a card. Said, why don't you come to church sometime? But I'm going to tell you that I dealt with a lot of fear in that moment of, what if he gets upset? What's he going to think of me? And somebody that I was never planning on seeing again unless they did end up at church. You ever felt like that at one time? What will people think? What will people do? How will it go down? Satan's favorite tool is one of his favorite tools is the tool of fear that leads to discouragement. I'm not good enough. I don't know how to witness to people. Nobody wants to be around me after I live this way. Everybody's going to think I'm a hypocrite if I change. A fear of not being good enough is another thing he uses against us. So how did Nehemiah deal with the trap of fear? What did he do to keep himself from falling into this? Nehemiah combated fear with truth. If you want to avoid the trap of fear, You're going to have to speak truth into that particular situation. Now you notice that the base of this attack was a lie, and Nehemiah's whole reaction to this was, that's not true. It's not the truth. It didn't happen that way. He spoke truth into the situation the way that we have to. So how do we speak truth into fear of what people think, and fear of not being good enough, and fear of what I'll give up? Listen to what Psalm 27:1 says. Psalm 27:1 says, the Lord is my light and my salvation. Listen to that truth. The Lord is my light. The Lord is my salvation. He's all that matters. Guess what the next little bit of it says? Whom then shall I fear? See, the truth of it is, if we believe in God for who He is, if we remind ourselves of God's grace and His love that happens for us, it doesn't matter what happens in anything we're scared of, because Jesus Christ thinks you're to die for. At the end of the day, what situation have you faced this week that is not immediately cured by the thought, Jesus Christ died for me? Jesus Christ gave His life for me. Jesus Christ loves me. And God has promised to always be with me, and God is for me. What changes if we walk through every day thinking the God of the universe loves me and He guides me? If we just let Him whisper into our soul, I love you today, I loved you yesterday, and I love you for forever. I really don't care what people think of me when I think through that lens. I don't care what might or might not happen. It keeps me focused on the work of God and not on the maybe ifs or the what ifs. See, an attack of fear doesn't work when we believe God's truth, when we believe in His goodness. And so an attack of fear usually works for two reasons. Number one is we have a lack of faith. It's a heart problem that allows the trap of fear to stop us. I've got a lack of faith that God is who He says He is, that He is as good as He says He is. And I'm scared because I can't believe that God can deliver me. We sang that song this morning, Brother Danny. He is able to deliver me. A lack of faith causes us to have fear. But what if He doesn't? And the second thing that causes us to fall into the trap of fear is pride. Because sometimes we know that God can deliver us. We know that He will. We have faith in His power and we have faith in His goodness. But something inside of us says, I don't want what God wants because it's going to be hard on me. So the trap of fear finds us most when we have a lack of faith and when we have pride in our life. But Nehemiah spoke truth into that situation. But he didn't just speak truth. He believed the truth, and he let the truth envelop him. That's for us. Let's continue to read. We're going to read verses 10 through 14 here and look for the third trap. So Nehemiah said that we're not going to be scared. He prayed, "Oh God, strengthen our hands." Verse 10. Afterward I came unto the house of Shemaiah, the son of Delilah, the son of Metabil, who was shut up, and said, "Let us meet together in the house of God, within the temple, and let us shut the doors of the temple, for they will come and slay thee. Yea, in the night will they come and slay thee." And I said, should such a man as I flee? And who is there that, being as I am, would go into the temple to save his life? I will not go in. And lo, I perceived that God had not sent him, but that he pronounced this prophecy against me, for Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. Therefore was he hired, that I should be afraid and do so in sin, and that they might have the matter for evil report. Listen to this again. This is the purpose of this. That they might have matter for an evil report, that they might reproach me. Verse 14, "My God, think thou upon Tobiah and Sanballat, according to these their works, and the prophets, Noadiah and the rest of the prophets, that would have put me in fear." The third trap that Satan likes to use, the third trap in the story of Nehemiah, is the trap of compromise. The trap of compromise. Listen to what's going on in the story here. All of these problems are going on over the past couple of chapters, and this is within like a month's time. Nehemiah has dealt with an armed conflict. He has dealt with people trying to lure him to his death. He has dealt with people spreading rumors about him. He has dealt with the fear of dying at every moment. And look at what happens with the trap of compromise. A guy comes up to him, a prophet, it said, a priest, and he comes up to Nehemiah and he said, "Look, I know you're scared. I know you're terrified. I know that this is bad." He said, "Here's what we should do. They're going to come kill you in the night. Why don't we hide in the temple? We'll lock the doors. They'll never be able to find you. And if they do, they can't get in because we can lock the temple here." Why the temple? Well, number one, it's an unlikely place, and it was probably the safest place in the city because it was the place that the most effort had been put into building. But there's a trap of compromise here. See, the only people allowed to stay in the temple for an extended length of period of time, except the only time they can come in is when they sacrifice or when they praise, are Levites. These are the priests. They're the only people allowed to be there. And everybody else was banned from coming and especially locking the doors and staying the night inside the temple, inside the holy places. And so what we see here is that this is a compromise for Nehemiah. He's going to have to go against the instructions of the Lord to protect his own life. And you may be like me, you may be thinking about this like, well, that's a small price to pay for me to continue to do God's work. Like I'm going to break a small rule and then stay alive. Like that's a pretty good trade-off. And that's what they were hoping. This is what the trap of compromise does, is it tries to let us think that one thing, it's a small rule to break for a big reward. Nehemiah was able to look through this and he sees, I realize that God didn't send him, that this wasn't from God. We could have another message on false prophets. He says this isn't from God because God never calls us to compromise sin. He never calls us to compromise his instructions. He realized that he was hired by Tobiah and Sanballat to get him into the temple. Now why? Why does it matter? Why would they want Nehemiah to spend the night in the temple in a safe place if they were trying to kill him? Well, see, they realized that they weren't going to lure him out of the city. They realized they weren't going to attack him and win. They realized that he wasn't going to run in fear or be distracted from his work. And so they decided what we've got to do is we've got to get him to break the commandments of God, and then we've got to tell everybody who he is. We got to tell everybody what he's done. Isn't that how Satan gets most Christians? Isn't that how he gets us? It goes, he claims to be a man of God, but he breaks the rules. They go to church every Sunday, and then they act this way when people are looking. They post on social media Bible verses 1 second and rants full of profanity the next. They act like a Christian, but they're not. See, the trap of compromise can really mess us up. And this is the trap that gets us the most, because there's a little voice that says one small compromise isn't going to matter. One small slip isn't going to make a difference in what you're doing. Satan loves gray. God's word is black and white. There's right, there's wrong. There's no fence. It's a line. You're either on one side or you're on the other. But Satan loves to take that black and white. He likes to find a little gray area in the middle. And if he can get you in the gray, he can get you lost in what right and wrong is. Well, if it was okay to do it once, isn't it okay to do it twice? If it was okay to go that far, isn't it okay to go the next step? He loves the trap of compromise, because one of these days he's going to get you far enough that line that he ruins your reputation. And you and I, listen, we need to protect our reputation. You cannot witness to somebody and tell them about what God has done in your life if you live like the world. I'll go ahead and say this. You can't witness to somebody and tell them about what God has done in your life if they think you live like the world. It's important for us to keep our reputation clean and keep it pure, so that we can let people see God in us. See, compromise hurts our ability to serve God, because one slip is going to change everything, and Satan loves to pull us into a false sense of security. If Satan can't destroy you with a trap of lies, if Satan can't destroy you with a trap of fear, Satan will make it where other people can't hear you with a trap of compromise. He doesn't care how he stops you. He just wants to stop you from doing God's work. So how did Nehemiah handle this? I love Nehemiah. He's so straight. You know that his answers are like one-word answers. He says, no. He says, I can't do that. I can't compromise. He said, how can me, he was of the tribe of Judah, how can a guy like me in the tribe of Judah go where only people from the tribe of Levites should go? Only priests are supposed to be. He said, I can't do that. That's breaking God's rules. See, he was able to see this attack, and he knew good and well that God would not send him someone who would lead him astray. Nehemiah had a gift that every Christian has, but we don't always use. Nehemiah was being led by the Holy Spirit. Nehemiah was being led by God in what was right and what was wrong. And Nehemiah saw these attacks coming from a mile away. But here's the kicker. Here's what Nehemiah was willing to do. He was willing to listen. You know when you're falling into that trap of compromise, when there's a sin in your life and there's that voice in the back of your head that says, one time won't hurt, or just once more and then I'll never do it again, or I'm not even sure if that's that big of a deal anyway. That little voice that when you decide to do something, and for everybody in here, I think there's something in your mind. It says, oh, it's not a big deal. That's the trap of compromise. But there's also that voice in your head that says, don't fall for it this time. That's the voice of the Holy Spirit leading us. And God will always lead us, especially when we are working for Him. When you find yourself arguing with yourself, that probably tells you that God is doing something in your life. Musicians, please. So this morning I want to ask you, and this is what I've been praying for with all my heart. I prayed, God, would you just reveal what trap Satan is using against us the most? Folks, we have an amazing mission. There are people within 50 yards of this church that don't know Jesus Christ. And our job is to step out of here and take Jesus to them, to love them, to serve them, and spread the gospel. And I guarantee you, the more that we plan on doing that as a church, the more Satan is putting those traps of lies, the traps of fear, and the traps of compromise in us as individuals. So I've prayed to God, God, would you show me the traps that are getting me? God, would you show us the traps that are getting us? I'd like to invite you this morning to just come up here and give that to God and repent of anything that you feel like that the trap has captured you or the trap is capturing you.